Well, hi there everyone. Here we are with really Unit 1 for the course. Thank you very much for all of your first analysis papers. I've read all of those that have been submitted so far, and I've sent them back to you with some feedback in all cases. By now, I think you have the idea that first of all, you need to watch the video, because in the video I set up what is going to happen in the week's unit. Give you a little background about the readings and about the ideas that are posted on the discussion board. And I know that might be a little difficult for some of you to get to the laptop and to get a good connection to watch the video. But I think once you realize that that's the way we're going to work, and then you can, figure out how to apportion your time accordingly. The first question that I'm going to put on the discussion board is actually about your analysis papers. I don't want you to summarize everything that you wrote in the paper, but rather to tell us what you learned about yourself by writing the analysis paper. And did that surprise you? So you might have to give that a little bit more thought. Reading your papers, of course, evoked a lot of memories for me and different ideas that you wrote about. Sometimes it, triggered something in my own memory and brought back some aspect of the liturgical year to me. And that was great. But I wonder now, after you've written them, read them, maybe even started to do some more reading, what you really learned about yourself in that, and post that to the message board. And then go back and read and respond to others. Okay? I will put that in the question that I post on the message board. I'll always put it not just here in the video, but I'll put it elsewhere on this page of things to do, and then I'll embed it also in the question so that you won't have to go hunting for things all the time. So in this week's readings, the readings this week are sort of setting the stage for the course, you might say. There were 2 chapters in the Yellow Liturgical Year book, the Adolf Adam's book, and then there were 2 essays in Between Memory and Hope. And after reading the introduction to both books, you probably have a better idea of why that book is called Between Memory and Hope in the first place. So, first of all, in the introduction to Adolf Adam's book, he does something that Robert Taft also does in his essay, and that makes it very clear that the liturgical year is not just an ecclesiastical version of the civil year. Our civil year is really an organizational structure of time for consistency's sake, whereas the liturgical year is more theological. Returning to the experiences again and again deepens our appreciation of them, deepens our experience of them. And as you'll see, it's not about the past. It's not about remembering the past. It's about living the past in the present and moving us toward the future. So, that's very important to keep in mind. And Adolf Adam mentions that in the introduction. And when you get to Robert Taft's essay, he goes on at length about that as well. So the orientation in Adolf's 2 chapters really gives us an orientation toward the primitive festivals and toward the Jewish festal calendar. And both are an essential elements to understanding the liturgical year. Because, of course, our Christianity is rooted in both being a formerly primitive society and then coming out of the Jewish experience. So their attitude toward a year, first of all, but also the attitude toward feasting. I've always appreciated that our Jewish brothers and sisters, the sons and daughters of Abraham, seem to be much better at the feasting part than we have been. Also the importance of the Sabbath in the Jewish community, and the feasts and pilgrimage that form part of their lives. So Rosh Hashanah is the next Jewish festival that will be upon us, and this year it will run from October 2nd to October 4th. You know, we'd probably put in our time and go to church and have the, hour or so. But this feasting beginning the night before and continuing into the second night is really is something we could learn from better. So there would be a question on the message board about the Adam essay as well. Then in the Between Memory and Hope book, there are 2 essays that are there for this week's reading. And both are by really renowned scholars. Tom Talley, I think I told you last week, has died within the last few years. Robert Taft is still alive. I was at his Golden Jubilee summer before last. And Bob is he's ordained for the Eastern tradition. So he celebrates in the Eastern rather than in the Roman Rite, in the Eastern Rite. And his Jubilee celebration was in that rite as well. I really love the way Bob Taft uses language, especially his analogies. Pay really, really careful attention to them. So what he does, first of all, in this essay is really set up the important sources. Now, do keep in mind that this was written in 1980, so quite a few of the people that he refers to as being students, Gabriele Winkler and John Baldwin are 2 that come to mind immediately. They were graduate students in 1980, but now they are really renowned theologians in their own right. So keep that in mind. And when he's talking about things that are, hot off the press, well, they were hot off the press quite a while ago, 35 years ago, not hot off the press now. He does, however, introduce us to some important names, and that is also true in the Tom Talley essay as well. And I'll go through some of those important names that they refer to. Both refer to the Diary of Egeria, which is a unique element in the history of the liturgy. Egeria, we don't really know exactly who these people were, but Egeria was a woman who went on pilgrimage to the Holy Land in the 4th century and kept a journal, a very meticulous journal about all of the rituals that happened at that time. And so she made a really important contribution to liturgical history. And as I said, even when I was a graduate student, she wasn't even called Egeria. They would refer to her as Egeria or Altheria. They really weren't even sure of her name, but now they seem to have standardized that her name is Egeria. And who knows, we might learn more about her in coming times. But it's a unique kind of writing. And so it's a major contribution to liturgical history. Another thing that Bob Taft does is use analogies very, very carefully. So he talks about, one of the analogies he uses is that we study liturgical history for the same reason that a psychiatrist tries to understand a person's background. Not just to know what was in the background, but to be able to help the person live today, because what they experienced today was shaped by that background. So the importance is not just the background per se, but how it shapes belief. And that's the analogy he uses for the liturgical year. And that's not the only example of analogy that he uses, but there are several that he does use in there. So on the discussion board, there will be another question about Bob Taft. Actually, it's not so much put in the terms of a question, but rather a way to respond to him, let's say. And the third reading, as I said, is Tom Talley, who was just really a character. Actually, Taft and Talley were, as I said, they're both renowned, and they were friends, and they would banter back and forth. Talley was Episcopalian and taught at General Theological Seminary in New York City. And he really shows you how complicated all of this history is. So the point here is to understand how complicated it is, not to remember every single element that he talks about. So what's really good about his approach is that we learn both about Eastern and Western Christianity. So they're pretty well balanced there. And the other thing, as I mentioned, is that he raises up some names. Now, if you took Theology 150, you might be more familiar with these names, or even the undergraduate version of Theology 150, which is 2215. But besides Egeria, whom he also mentions, he refers to Tertullian and Hippolytus and Irenaeus. And all of them are important contributors to very early liturgical history. We have their writings. We haven't always had their writings. They were discovered in more recent times, in the late 19th century. But they help to give us a kind of shape of what the experience of the early church was like, and elements. But remember, nobody was writing history for the sake of writing history at that time. They really thought that, it's all going to pass away because Christ is going to come again. And so they lived with that more of the immediacy of the second coming of Christ. So there wasn't a kind of keeping of history for the sake of keeping history. So those are the readings for this week, and there will be questions on each of them on the discussion board. And you have to figure out what is your own work pattern. I wouldn't say leave it all to the last minute and then just, blitz through for 6 hours and do reading. But to do them bit by bit, piece by piece. Maybe go right away and look at what's the question about the analysis paper, and think about how you're going to respond to that and do that. And then, read the Adam section in that book and answer that question. But, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm kind of giving you kind of a strategy for yourself. But as I say, each of the questions on the discussion board will be very specific about what you need to answer. And remember, they should be substantive, not a sentence, but, a healthy paragraph. And responding to each other can be shorter, but your initial response should have some weight to it, some meat to it, substance to it. There will always be a question for each of the units on, do you have any questions about this reading? And then I will answer your questions there, and then I'll use that to shape next week's lesson as well. So if you have any questions, besides putting them on the discussion board, you have enough ways to contact me by phone, by email, or text. I hope you enjoy the readings, and I hope you enjoy Taft and Tally. We called him Tafty and Tally, as much as I have enjoyed these men. Have a good week.